Hi, Tracy Kanoski here, www.healthylifestylesmt.com, and we're here today to talk about nutrition. I am a different kind of dietitian, different kind of nutritionist, and so of course it seems like we'll always talk about nutrition, but that's not always the case. So I'm recently back from the Institute for Functional Medicine's annual conference. The topic this year was nutrition. I'm going to give you a few pearls from that conference, and we're going to talk about the food industry, and at the end I'm going to give you some action steps of what you can do to honestly and significantly improve your health. Okay, so starting off at the IFM conference, we had a lively debate between Dr. Lauren Cordain, who's kind of the paleo guy, right? And so he argued for the paleo diet. We had Dr. Mimi Gorneri arguing for the Mediterranean diet, and then we had Dr. Joel Furman arguing for the vegetarian, small amount of animal protein, but largely vegetarian. Super interesting, and one common theme between all of them was that in order to do this well, it was a lot of plant foods. Even on the paleo diet, Dr. Lauren Cordain was not advocating that you spend your life eating cheeseburgers with bacon without the bun. We heard from Mark Hyman about how addicting food was, and we actually heard from Dr. David Ludwig, who's a researcher and professor at Harvard. He's a pediatrician, teaches nutrition, and he's the one who's actually done the studies that Mark Hyman so eloquently quotes, like where they take the mice and they offer them sugar water or heroin, and time after time, even mice that were addicted to heroin switch over to sugar. Mice that were addicted to heroin switch over to artificial sweetener. So that's the power of what's happened to that's what's going on in our brain, is that sugar is addicting. So Mark Hyman eloquently summed that all up for us. We heard from Randy Girtle, who is with Duke University, and he's famous for a mice study in that he took Agoudi mice, and they were identical because that's what you can do with mice, and one mouse got methylated, which is a big passion of mine, the methylation pathway, and then the other mouse did not get methylated, and he was able to document the changes in their health, which is fascinating because we all need to methylate, and it can be a genetic mutation or SNP that some of us inherit, and we don't methylate well, and it does result in chronic disease. I see it over and over in my practice. And then we heard some really great stuff from Dr. Michael and his wife, Dr. Lesli Stone, who run a private practice and do a lot of prenatal care, and just how the influence of prenatal nutrition on the fetus, and that don't forget that that fetus is forming either sperm or the ovaries right there, and so those are already influenced before that baby's even born. And fascinating things to think about, how we have multi-generational effects just from one person and the choices that they make. Okay, so I want to take a leap from there and talk about the fact that I've been doing nutrition now. I've been studying it for 20 years. I've been out of graduate school for 15 years, and I've had a private practice largely on and off all this time. Sometimes more so than others, I guess, because I did some consulting work in there. But my point is that since the early 2000s, I've had a private practice, and I'm here to tell you, just in case you didn't notice, because whatever, I don't know, you live under a rock, people are sicker today than they've ever been. It was normal for people to get old and have some health trouble, right? We are now sick across the spectrum. We have little kids, statistically, that 1 in 3 will have diabetes by the year 2020. We're creeping up on that. That's not that far away. It seemed unfathomable, you know, in the early 2000s to hear that statistic, but it's happening. And 1 in 3 adults will have diabetes by 2050. You know the autism rates, if you've been around getting my newsletter, used to be 1 in 10,000. It was rare, it was hardly ever seen, and now we have 1 in 50 kids with autism. So I'm here to ask you the question, do you think as the human race we are just devolving and it happens spontaneously, or do you think there's a cause and effect? So by cause and effect, that's my vote, and I mean that the choices we make on a daily basis, what kind of food we eat, what we do to manage our stress, and what we get for exercise, what kind of things we have in our home. Are you using Glade air fresheners? What kind of shampoo are you using, and is it full of parabens and phthalates? Every single day we are making choices that are talking to our genes. I'm here to tell you that. That's my vote. If you think we're de-evolving, That's great. So my summary, my clinical pearl today, if you grasp anything, is that there is an enormous disconnect and ignorance of what has happened in the food industry. If you don't swim in the shoes that I swim in on a daily basis, maybe you just honestly don't realize what they've done. And you're voting with your dollar. They've convinced you you don't have time to cook. They've convinced you that healthy doesn't taste good, and they couldn't be more wrong. They are making a fortune, and you're in the doctor's office, or either yourself or with a family member because somebody is sick and not doing well. I've been teaching nutrition for nursing students for almost 5 years now. It's now a mandated course. They get one class in nutrition, which granted is better than zero. And I can tell you that the young students, and I'm not here to offend anybody, but the young students, and I mean like the early 20s, honestly do not know what has happened to the food supply. And that's been a big light bulb for me, because I grew up with home-cooked meals and we didn't eat out, and my mom didn't let us have sugary cereals when I was a kid, and I hated it. But I get it now, and now people just really don't even know. So back then we knew, and you know, when we went camping we were able to have soda and potato chips, but that was not a daily staple. And look what has happened just in my lifetime. So there's an ignorance, there's a disconnect, there is a cause and effect. Food is medicine, and it can be the best medicine in the world. It can be the pharmacy, Pharmacy, or it can be the slowest form of poison. Let me tell you what I see with my patients with migraines for kind of a quick insight. When we identify that somebody has a chemical trigger, let's say it's polysorbate 80, or let's say it's watermelon, it doesn't matter. When we identify that that's your trigger for a migraine, those people avoid it like the plague. They will not choose to have watermelon or a product with polysorbate 80 in it and have a migraine. What happens though is it's slow poison, and when you have a Frappuccino or French fries or Pop-Tarts or diet soda or regular soda, it doesn't matter, pick something that's not a whole food, you don't have diabetes or cardiovascular disease or Alzheimer's or Parkinson's the next day. It doesn't come like that. It's a long, slow process. So every day we're making these decisions and we don't feel so great. You've got fatigue, you've got some joint pain, and you think it's normal, and you go to the doctor and they say, well, your labs are fine, there's nothing really wrong with you. I could give you a pain pill, but we don't know how to just fix your low back pain. Or, you know, once I documented that if you were to hire me and you told me you had fatigue, I think I came up with 12 or more reasons of that you could have fatigue. It could be hypothyroid, it could be iron deficiency anemia, B12 deficiency anemia, it could be adrenals. The list went on, and I was able to come up with lots of reasons. But we don't have medical Columbos that way anymore. That isn't mainstream medicine. So this will sound, I don't know how to say it, but the medical establishment, the system itself, I'm not going to pick out any one person or profession, but the system really has become contaminated, and it's become a system of, this is what you have, you either have an autoimmune disease or you don't. If you don't, and your antibodies they're up one day and then they're down in 6 months and then they're back, and they say, well, you don't really have an autoimmune disease, we don't know what to do with you, come back in another 6 months. Or if you really do have an autoimmune disease now, you get your jersey and you get your drug, right? And now I have this, and you get ICD-9 code of rheumatoid arthritis across your forehead or something. That is what conventional medicine has become. I don't know if you realize, you know, you probably do see that that's happening. What I don't know if you understand is that there's a different way. It's why I go out of state to all these functional medicine trainings where we are trained in biochemistry. I feel like I'm back in graduate school all the time. We're trained in root causes. We're trained in understanding that all systems talk to each other. If you have a thyroid problem, you have an adrenal problem. If you are hypothyroid and it's not controlled, your cholesterol goes up. The answer isn't to give you a statin. The answer is to figure out what to do about your thyroid, which is largely affected by toxins. So we're trained, my point is that everything is connected and everything talks to each other. And the point is not to have a rheumatologist and an endocrinologist and a cardiologist. The point is to understand what are the root causes and what really is fundamental to what's going on here. So I want to leave you with some action steps. And if you take what I'm saying to heart, you will do yourself an enormous favor. Action step number 1 is to eat as much organic food, produce, as you can. There was a study that I've quoted for a long time, and I finally decided it's no longer true. I don't know how the light bulb ended up coming on, but for 20 years I've been walking around saying studies show that people who eat more fruits and vegetables are healthier than people who don't eat more fruits and vegetables. In some fashion, that's probably still true. Excuse my French, but we are now spraying the hell out of food. It's not enough to have Roundup because all the food has become resistant to Roundup. Monsanto's done their stuff. They're now petitioning to be able to use Roundup and 2,4-D on your food. 2,4-D is one step away from Agent Orange. Is that really what you want on your food supply? Have you seen the pictures of the guy spraying the crops and he's in a suit from head to toe and a mask? Have you heard about the McDonald's French fries that the farmer won't go out into the field to spray? They have a robotic system set up because the chemicals are so toxic, but they want those perfect French fries to be long and not have any brown spots. And when they harvest the potatoes, they're so toxic that they go sit in a bunker for 6 weeks until they're legally able to sell them. You don't swim in all that, but I do. I know what they've done to the food supply. The food industry is only interested in selling you processed food, and you are voting with your dollar. They have convinced you that you don't have time to cook, that you don't have time to do dishes, that they can give you the same quality of food, that you can cook at home, and it's just not true. This does take some work, and ask anybody with cancer or diabetes or early dementia or whatever, what it takes emotionally and financially to go to all the doctor visits. I'm not kidding when I say it's time to spend your money on organic food. Find somebody who's raising beef, find somebody who raises pigs and buy a pig a year, find somebody who raises chickens. If you're here in Billings, Mary's, that has the Mary's Health Food Store, is now doing chickens, which I think are fabulous. You can get grass-fed, non-GMO feed. Don't be fooled by the whole vegetarian feed, because if that means that they're fed GMO corn, you're not ahead, you're actually behind. So anyway, my point is to start asking questions, learn about your food, get a garden, big or small, join a community-supported agriculture, get what you can, or I did a whole video on what you can get at Costco, and they have a lot of organic food. I'm right now also working on a written blog about how much healthier food at Costco is than a big box store like Walmart, and I'll save that for another day, but really spend your money on as much organic food as you can. I'm going to say eat at home 90% of the time, no more than once a week, and if you only eat out once a month, I'd be tickled pink. Don't forget the little restaurant story I told you about the gal who knew what was safe to eat and ate in a restaurant and still would come home sick. The other thing you can do is that I have probably 100 recipes on my website at this point for healthy food that it's stuff I eat. This is whole food, it's paleo-ish. I wouldn't ever call myself paleo-ish, but I do feel better being grain-free. I eat whole foods. If I forget to say it in the recipe, forgive me, but most all of it is organic. I'm buying as much organic food as I can. Johnny and I rarely eat out, and we, eating out costs $50. Well, that buys me a lot of extra food, right? I can afford to spend a few extra dollars per item if that's what it takes to get some organic half and half for his coffee. It's $1 more to get organic coffee beans. I can afford to do that if we don't blow $50 or more on one restaurant meal. So again, let's just summarize the action steps. Be eating organic as much as you can. Find locally sourced food and ask the questions. Is it grass-fed? Do they get vaccines, antibiotics? How often do you spray your grass, even when it's grass-fed? Is it, what do you have to do to keep the grass looking like real grass and not be a weed haven? Those are all things to ask. Half of your plate should be fruits and vegetables and should be colorful. Follow me on Instagram. I don't know if it's exciting or not, but I'm often taking a picture of what I eat, because if it's encouraging to you, then more power to you. So, and the last action step here is to go to my website and just check out some real whole foods recipes and start cooking at home. It will pay off more than you can imagine. So we're out of time, and I'll see you next week.